I uncovered what could potentially be the largest fraud scandal in the U.S. history that's been openly discovered on a broad level and a national level to where there's actually proof where people could see with their eyes that fraud was taking place. And so since I've launched my video in the past 72 hours, it's the most viewed video ever by somebody who's not named Mr. Beast. That's a long format video. That's pure organic reach. No ads, nothing like that, just pure organic reach. Over 130 million views on just the video alone on X. And then if you count all the other impressions, it did over 500 million views within 72 hours.
When you were filming this, did you expect it to go so viral?
No, I knew it was a great video, but because I've been making videos for so long that I just thought it'd just to be the weekly upload. But no, this has completely changed everything.
Why do you think this went so viral to that degree?
Yeah, there's a mix of why it went so viral. Is because we always talk about fraud. You always hear about issues here in the United States. Oh, fraud, we're sending money there. We're sending money there. Why are we sending money to this country? Why are we sending money to these organizations? How come these politicians are getting rich and how are they doing it? But what I did for the first time ever is I actually went to a location, multiple locations, had the numbers, had the exact amount of dollars they were receiving. And I went and just asked them, hey, can I enroll a child, my son, little Joey, into daycare? Can I talk to somebody? Can I get a brochure? Where are the children at? We don't hear them anywhere. There's no footprints in the snow. And so it's the first time where Americans could really see that fraud is taking place openly and people are receiving millions of dollars for running these daycares, home healthcare companies, and they're actually not doing anything.
Now, a lot of this seems to be the work of David, who spent a lot of time going through this. Who is David and how did you get connected to him?
Yeah, so David, he's a man in Minnesota. He's been a lifelong advocate to stop crime and political corruption and to stop fraud inside of Minnesota. Because Minnesota, they have a long history of fraud. This isn't just new that they've been doing these daycares. But I knew about the fraud taking place back in June. I went to Minnesota to do a video about the demographic change, the rise of Islam, how mosques are now replacing Christian churches, is how entire cities and communities are being taken over by the Somali population and people are getting pushed out of these locations. And when I was there, people started telling me about the fraud. They're like, you need to go check the daycares. You need to go talk to the home health care, the assisted living. Like, why are there all these transportation vehicles running around with nobody in them? And I said, well, I can't make the video now, because before I do, I want to make sure you just can't accuse people of millions of dollars of fraud without evidence. And so I continue to work on it and try my best to get the resources and the numbers, but it's super hard. And then David just DM'd me out of the many DMs I get. I just, for some reason, happened to open up David's and he actually provided value inside of the comment. He said, I have all the numbers. So I gave David a call and he's like, I have everything. I've been getting information from inside of the Capitol, and he had all the numbers. And I was like, well, are you sure like this is fraud? He's like, this has been happening for so long. I've never seen a child at any of the daycares. I drive by every year for the past 7 years of going to work, and I've never seen a single child.
Now, what's David's background? Because I was really curious about him, of how he was able to compile so much information. Is this just like a hobby of his?
He's been fighting fraud for years. Even like when he was my age, he was just interested in the well-being of his communities. And so David, he's just seen the fraud and he's seen the Somali population just expand. He's seen what Tim Walz has done as far as pretty much destroying the state. For instance, Minnesota was in a $16 billion surplus in the last biennium, and now they're in a $4 or $6 billion deficit.
So was this already a really well-known local issue? So like people just knew about it in the town, or was this something that like a few people knew about who are really attuned to like, governments and stuff like that?
People knew about it inside of Minnesota because the fraud's not new. Like there's videos back from like 2015 where the FBI went into these daycares, or in 2017, they're talking about the fraud, but nobody could really get it to a national level because one, back in those days, censorship's pretty heavy. You didn't have the power of X. You didn't have the power of just being able to post freely onto the internet. And then it was just kind of a local issue. When the local news is doing their videos, they don't really know how to portray something to a way where it reaches national level. And they just have to go through all these different editorial processes versus a YouTuber like me who can edit, film, and then upload, versus going from filming the editing room, okay, final editing process, then we post it on our news website, and then we'll post it onto our YouTube, and then it never actually gets reaches the masses, and it's usually an older person who people can't relate with.
So when you say they are committing fraud, they are creating these daycare centers, they're embezzling millions, defrauding millions of dollars. Who are they?
The government in Minnesota, the people at the Capitol, because they're the ones writing the checks, they know that fraud is taking place because they have all of the violations. They have all the many times where a lot of these daycares are ran by the same person. And then 89% of the population that is committing the fraud is Somalians.
In terms of fraud, could you walk us through the flow of money step by step in terms of who applies, who pays the money, who is behind that payment, who audits this, and who investigates it?
So with the fraud, all the checks are being written from the Capitol. They're all being written from the people inside of the Capitol of Minnesota. And the way they get this money, some of it's federal money, it's also state money. And inside of departments like the Home and Health Services, the HHS, they give funding for things like childcare. And so what happens is Tim Walz, for instance, he's openly bragged about expanding daycare inside of Minnesota. He said, like, we're going to give them raises back in 2023. And then even in the debate with J.D. Vance, he was talking about how great it was of their childcare system inside Minnesota. The Minnesota government is so incompetent that multiple people will have violations or they'll have history of doing crime, but they'll still let them open up a daycare and then they'll receive this federal money. And so there's entire whistleblowers who have created all these charts and everything about this one man having this one home healthcare business. He also has a daycare. He has 6 violations and he's still getting millions of dollars. But I believe it's all because the people are afraid to be called an Islamophobic or racist.
So basically, the state sets up a fund, and some of that's from state money, some of it's from federal government money.
Mm-hmm.
The fund says we're going to give money to people who open up daycares.
On welfare purposes.
That enables anybody to apply for this, get federal funding with basically saying, hey, we have X amount of students here, X amount of kids are coming in. They give that in. And then what's the audit process like to make sure that's legitimate?
Yeah, that's the problem. And that's why the fraud's been able to go on for so long. Nobody really knows exactly how that audit process has been working because they've been enabling fraud for so long. Tim Walz has openly said that we've been fighting fraud since 2019. Okay, well, Graham, if you're running a business and you have millions and billions of dollars being funneled to places, how long do you think it would take for you to cut off the funding?
How are you fighting fraud for 6 years?
Exactly.
Like, shouldn't the fight end
He's
at some point?
He's been enabling the fraud to happen. And that's why what I did was such a compelling piece of content because it's showing that they're enabling this fraud to happen and nobody's even checking up. And these daycares can't even give you a brochure to enroll a child.
Do you think that there's anything going on between the government and the people that own these daycares? Is there any money that's being funneled back into the government, or are these Somalians just becoming rich?
100%, because Ilhan Omar, congresswoman from Minnesota, well, she's from Somalia. She was then brought here to the United States. Her net worth went from negative to allegedly $30 million.
So when you went into this, did you expect this to be more so just government waste, or did you expect full-blown fraud?
I expected a little bit of both. Like, I remember David saying, like, we're going to go to the daycares. And so in the first clip of the video, you'll see me go to the daycare center. I'm like, all right, let's go in. And I go to open the door and it's locked. But their sign says open 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. right above me. And I'm like, what's going on? All the windows are blacked out. But yet they received millions of dollars this year.
Now, what do you say to people who say, well, the door should be locked because we want to protect the students. We want to make sure that they're not like just going to open the door and run off. And we want to protect people like observing inside the windows. And that's why it's important to have privacy.
Yeah, CNN asked me that same question. I said, okay, well, fair point. Then how come when I call that phone number, nobody answers? And how come when I ring the doorbell and ask for a brochure, they can't give me any paperwork to enroll a child? So yeah, maybe you lock the door, go ahead and do that. But you should be able to answer a simple question. When I ask, how do I enroll my son Joey into daycare? How do I do it? They can't even answer it.
What was the most shameless thing that you saw in person?
Just the fact that they couldn't give me any responses. They're receiving millions of dollars and I can't even get a brochure to enroll an imaginary son Joey into daycare.
Did they appear to have any guilt when you spoke to them, or did they seem entitled and just everything was like twisted?
Very much entitlement. They treated me like I was like scum to them. They called the police on me. They kicked me out of their buildings, and I was simply asking for rates and for brochures to enroll a child in daycare and for healthcare. And they said I was doing some sort of propaganda piece. And this isn't about the race. However, when 89% of that population is committing fraud, that's just a fact. It doesn't make you a racist for talking about fraud.
Now, what about the counter arguments I saw that people would be more closed off talking to you when you show up with a camera or you pull up in like some SUV and they don't know who you are versus just like some lady just walking up, knocking on the door?
A good counterclaim would do that be, well, just answer the question so there's no confusion. I'm not coming across hostile. I'm just asking you the simple question. And in a lot of cases, for instance, the one lady who I interviewed, I tried to ask for a brochure. Everyone else was in the car. I went up by myself. David was far away. She had all the opportunities in the world to just simply answer some questions.
Have you heard any counter arguments to your video that gave you any pause or that maybe you thought, hey, that's actually a good point?
No.
You haven't had anybody reach out to you saying that I've actually, had a kid at this childcare?
No.
I would imagine
the mainstream media has tried to come after me so much to the point where they're defending fraud now. One of the daycares I went to, they wouldn't open the door. And then a few days later, since I released my video, CBS then went to the daycare. And I don't doubt that there are some children inside these daycares because you'd be super stupid to be running these and not at least have a few kids in there. So this one daycare is licensed for 40 children. CBS goes there. The guy can barely speak English, and they do this hit piece on me, and they're like, we're an operating daycare. We have 4 children here. Okay, well, they're licensed for 40, and you're receiving millions of dollars. Each one of those children aren't worth $250,000 a year for government funding.
So how much were these centers making, and how much were people taking home from that?
Well, the largest one was $3.45 million. And then on the low, it'd be around $1.2 million.
So one thing I'm really curious about, the landlords of these buildings, do they know what's going on? Do you think they're in on it? Are they charging market rates for these places? Who owns the buildings that these people are leasing?
Yeah, I haven't really looked into that, but I'm sure they're just happy to be committed. I'm sure they're happy to be receiving a check every single month.
Yeah, because I got to say, so when I looked into a lot of Los Angeles and California, it seems as though people will open up these like homeless centers, but they'll pay these absurd amounts in rent.
Mm-hmm.
And the landlords allegedly go in with the mindset of like, hey, we're going to charge either a lot of money or we know these people and we could kick back some money to the owner of this building. That could be something to look into that I was curious about.
Yeah, I think if you're a landlord, you're probably just happy to have somebody inside your building and you know they're getting money from the government, so you know they're going to pay every single month. So if I was a landlord, I'd probably rent to them too. Just smart business.
One thing I'm really curious about, you mentioned Ilhan Omar is now worth $30 million, and when she went into office, she was actually in debt with a negative net worth. Can you just go in and see where her money is coming from?
No, I don't think we can, but I think they have to make it public. I think they have to make it public what their net worth is, congressmen and congresswomen.
They have to provide a list of
something.
assets. The IRS would probably be the only one that would know where the money is coming from.
Because I think they only receive $175,000 a year with their salary from Congress.
It seems like, at least for the population, not necessarily for the Congress people, it would be bipartisan to mandate, if you're in office, you show your net worth when you join office, and then you show all of your tax returns or where your money is coming from while you serve.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that would be every normal person that isn't in government would agree on that. But obviously, any senator or congressperson, like left or right, would probably not vote for that.
Yeah, I think it's hard because it's like, how do you say like, oh, they can trade stocks, but we can't, for instance. But when they're inside Congress, so it's like maybe if that's something that the government should look into, like, okay, if you're going to become a congressman or congresswoman for these 4 years or for however long you're in here, your main focus is just to serve the American people and not to be having outside interest to boost your net worth. Because we can't just say like, hey, no, you can't invest or you're only going to have a 401k. Because if you see an opportunity, you should be able to invest as well. But to have exponential returns like Nancy Pelosi or Ilhan Omar, that's just very suspicious.
Or at least transparency, like where is Ilhan Omar's money coming from?
Yes.
Like if we were able to just see that she was collecting massive wire transfers from Leering, Center, then we'd be able to prove something.
Yeah, I think it would give a lot more people more transparency and then also a lot more trust.